So, welcome all at this impact event called Sacred Exchanges. On the one hand, we cannot live without capitalism, and on the other hand, we need capitalism. And in this event, we're gonna look for some sort of alternatives, perhaps in other religious beliefs, as an alternative for the way we have our Western economy at this moment. Okay, so please a warm applause for our next guest, Eelke de Jong, who will dive into this question exactly.
So, the setup, I will first of all talk about economic growth, then culture, what I understand, then follow Weber, Mahathir, and then the relation between culture and economic growth and the sources of economic growth. Culture, what is that? In this literature, it's something like values common to a group. You could say a common mindset. And in a book of mine, I also refer to politicized culture. And that is a particular type, and that is a purposefully created view on the development and origins of a group created mostly by political leaders. The guy whom is more or less the one who started this debate about the relation between religion and values associated with religion and economic growth. That was Max Weber. Suppose the wages get increased, so one who is working gets more income. Will that also lead to more labor? It could also be that we say, okay, my income was okay, so I work less. So whether what I have called here the first option is chosen requires a certain spirit. And according to Max Weber, that is found in certain branches of Protestantism. Not, for example, in Lutherans, but it is found in Calvinism, Pietism, Baptism, etc. And according to him, that is because in Calvinism, for example, there is this predestination theory which says that you are selected by God already from the beginning. So labor is not just a duty or something which I have to do because of the landlord is asking me or the boss, etc. No, it's a calling. I have to work, and due to that I can acquire wealth, and that's a signal that God has selected me. The next presentation will be about Islamic banking, and according to many, the interest ban, so it's not allowed to pay interest, is an important part of Islamic banking. But this idea is there also already in the Christian and Jewish tradition. In the Middle Ages it was forbidden, and that was essentially because of this. You pay an interest because you acquire it for a certain time, and you would have liked to have it earlier. So it's about time. And time is of God, so it's not allowed that you ask money from a good which belongs to God. So that was, in that tradition, the story of not paying interest.
Okay, so there is this premise that if we had used Islamic finance in the rest of the world, perhaps this crisis would have never happened. Our next guest, David Bassens, he works as a financial geographer at the University of Brussels. We'll dive into this whole idea of Islamic banking and perhaps if it will fit our society better than our current system.
So basically what I want to do today is discuss about, well, and inform really, what is this Islamic financial sector, who is doing it, where is it happening, and how is it happening? What makes an Islamic bank Islamic? Well, that's not an easy thing because we basically don't really know what an Islamic bank is doing. So how can you tell? Well, when there's a board of Sharia scholars. So next to the regular board, there's also another board of well-paid Sharia scholars. And what do these guys do? Well, they screen activities and investments, they supervise the development of new products, and the whole point here is that they're remunerated, and it often leads to a kind of a practice of rubber stamping. So they basically, oh, there's another contract. Hey, let's put the stamp and it's okay. And another problem is that actually these Sharia scholars are being used to legitimize products that are, well, at face value, not really Sharia compliant. So there's a kind of an element of Sharia arbitrage. One is trying to, well, make it Sharia compliant and try to be, well, stretch the Islamic law as much as possible. So what's the second part of my talk about, if time permits? It's about what goes on in wholesale markets. And this is actually a figure that shows office networks of the biggest Islamic firms. There's a big interaction between both areas. And if you look closely, well, Manama, Bahrain is very important, but this is related to more institutional things. What we see is that the second biggest center is actually Dubai. What we have seen is that Dubai tries to present itself as a kind of a financial center. This means it also co-evolves with how property or offices are being valuated across financial centers. And what we see is that somehow activity in Dubai is drying up and that the demand for office space is, well, collapsing. And the associated foreign investments in property, for instance, European and American experts that have bought a villa on the Palm, well, they're leaving their stuff. So prices collapse, and in general, you could say the markets no longer believe in Dubai, so money becomes more expensive, and Dubai cannot longer service its debts. So to conclude, if it would not be obvious from my story, is this a crisis-proof model? Well, in practice, as it exists in the Gulf region, no, it isn't. So my basic argument is that Islamic finance, in these cases, are more a product of financialized globalization and the creation of another investment category. Now, not an emerging market, but an Islamic market. And this is related to the speculative construction of Dubai, for instance. In these constructive activities, it's mainly conventional banks, but also Islamic banks that are very prominent, and it leads to, well, copying behavior between the Islamic and the conventional system.
The title of the evening was Sacred Exchanges, and I'm trying to sort of address that issue. What types of exchanges and what sort of qualitative differences of exchanges do you found when you make anthropological distinctions between types of societies? Okay, now one of the books that I then have to call is a sort of canonical work in anthropology is a work by Marcel Mauss, was written in the early 20th century, and he's writing about exactly this issue. How do societies structure themselves through systems of exchange, and what characterizes these exchanges? And how do then indeed societies that are ruled by the market and by money differ from societies that are ruled by what he called gift and gift systems, systems of gift giving. And one of the distinctive features of what he calls traditional societies and the quality of exchanges there is that even though a gift has the idea of being free, and you give something without obligation, that's the idea of a gift, you give for a birthday, and that should be a gift that you receive and does not oblige you to return a gift, that is a social lie. It's idea that in earlier or in traditional ritualized exchanges, social differentiation is highly important and valued and has to be created and recreated, and that in market context you try to pretend, at least, that social differentiations don't matter. So when I'm talking about this, I'm really trying to talk about the core issue of this evening, sacred exchanges. These exchanges are sacred in the sense that they continue life and they're important for growth. What we move towards, according to Mauss, is a system where we have immediate transactions. So if you do a monetary transaction with someone, you can just afterwards walk out and you don't ever see each other anymore. It doesn't matter. Whereas when you have a gift, you've received a gift, we will continue to stand in a relationship because this gift has to be re-given, even if the idea is that it is a free gift. The idea of monetary transactions, and that's also something where anthropologists are so sad about money, is that it is immediate. You don't create long-lasting socialities. That's an idea, right, in contrast with these sacred exchanges in ritual sectors. Okay. But we know, of course, and that's why I'm asking, so is that true? When you don't think about the institutional setting actually of money, just as a user of money and thinking about the freedom, where do we get all this trust from? Why did we trust that? And why did we think that, just listening to Greenspan is enough to sort of think that we knew that the world would be okay? And that is, I think, coming back to the topic of tonight, sacred exchanges. I really think that money in itself is a highly religious institution in the sense that it requires belief that you don't have any proof for. You just have to buy into it, believe it. And the fact that the two terms are so similar expresses that. I find it very interesting that in addition to alternatives like Islamic financial systems, you also, of course, have seen now new alternative systems of currency that indeed ask for that idea that money should be embedded, should be in a particular social configuration that you know, that you're familiar with, that you can rely on and trust. So this claim back from this world of wizards that have been telling us all these things about monetary systems, but apparently they didn't work, has now led to a sort of reclaiming of our own social worlds by also making alternative and new forms of currency. Okay, that's it.